Hi, I'm Ellie. Thanks for joining me today. Can you feel that? Can you feel it? It's right here. Yeah? That feeling like time is moving faster than it ever did before, like something massive and terrifying, but strangely beautiful is just about to happen. It's just kind of over there, just out of reach. If you know what I'm talking about, then you're not alone. You're kind of in the same position as me. A lot of people feel exactly the same way that you and I do. I can feel it. I can. Something is coming and nobody knows what it is. I mean, people say, there are people out there who say they know what it is, but they don't know what it is either. But it's definitely something and it's definitely coming. And the things that we do know, well, we do know how it's coming and why it's coming. And it's coming because of us, humanity. In today's show, we're going to be looking at what's often referred to as the sacred trinity, the mind, the body, and the spirit. And we're going to explore how the invisible realms of thought and emotion shape everything, because that's the how. The who is the we and the how is the energy. Because it does. It shapes everything and it's bringing the future. And it feels as though the future is going to be massive. Massive, terrifying, and strangely beautiful. But this invisible realm of emotion and thought that we generate as a species, well, it shapes our entire world. And perhaps even it has an impact, whether direct or indirect, on aspects of reality that go beyond our world. So let's begin. This is something that people have been talking about for a long time, a few decades at least. So you might not have heard it for the first time here today. But the idea is that something is coming, except it's different these days, the way it's being discussed and the way that everyone is talking about it, because increasingly everyone can feel it coming. More and more. It's implied in, news headlines that seem different to usual, and people are having peculiar dreams, even people who normally don't have peculiar dreams. Not people like me. I'm always having weird and wacky dreams, but people who normally just have a quiet sleep or don't sleep at all, suddenly they're experiencing new phenomena in their dreams. Those dreams are becoming vivid, or they might even include messages. It doesn't mean we have to understand them, but they're there, and that's what makes it really interesting. Sometimes people are even predicting things that end up happening the next day. It doesn't have to be a major thing like an earthquake or some kind of financial crash or boom or something like that. It could just be a little thing like a phone call from a person we haven't heard from for years, or a lucky strike at work, or, something that was unexpected, but then the night before we kind of had a feeling about it in our dreams. And it feels a little bit different these days as well, because the seconds that normally seem to define our reality and seemed really predictable, it's like they've kind of lost their footing in a way, and they're starting to glide down a steep mountain, or even faster than that, maybe even like a ski slope covered in snow or something like that, moving like a snowball, going faster down and down and down this hill. Some call it increasing anticipation. Some people call it the collapse of the reality. Or maybe it's just some kind of metamorphosis, I don't know, a transformation into something new. But, look around. Revolutions have been increasing in number and surging over the past 10 years across areas like the Middle East and Asia. But also in the past 10 years, protest has increased, and general unrest in unexpected places. So in Europe and in the United States. North America in particular has been experiencing this very peculiar phenomenon. And I recently did a community post asking whether people thought that that they could sense it or not. And the response was kind of mixed, and I think it's because of how I phrased the question. But I had asked about whether it felt as though North America, and in particular the United States, was experiencing more natural phenomena than usual. And I think people kind of misunderstood that to be natural disasters, like tornadoes or floods or something like that, or earthquakes, which kind of puts America or the United States in a sort of a central place with everyone else. I actually meant something more than that. I meant the kind of natural phenomena that's coming from the sky, the oceans, and the land all combined. Things like solar flares and sightings and things. And I actually did some research on that, and apparently the United States is at the top of countries that are experiencing a combined increase and prevalence of these natural phenomena that are significant in lots of different ways. They kind of have this turbulence to them or a frequency to them that's different. It's kind of interesting, but it also fits with things like prophecy. And so I'm going to probably look at it as an entirely different show down the line. But, earthquakes are hitting unusual places. The financial systems of the world are beginning to struggle under the weight of, I don't know, I guess we could call it denial or something. And more often than not, the world is kind of holding its breath these days because little things like minor conflicts and skirmishes that are happening around the world are becoming a bit more, it feels more as though the systems that keep everything stable are not really holding everything as well as it used to. So there are other parts of the world where the birth rate is kind of dropping at unprecedented rates, and other parts of the world that are becoming very overpopulated. And it just seems like everything's a little bit off kilter, which feels a little bit like a fourth turning kind of thing where it all becomes just a bit too much. And then the entire weight of everything that's happening causes collapse to the status quo and room for something new. It's kind of, it's like we're all here and we're living our lives and knowing deep down inside that the old system is doing things that kind of give us signs that it's starting to fall apart. It might be talking tough, the status quo might be talking tough, like everything's okay and it's all the same. But it seems as though there are cracks in that status quo, in that system. We can tell because actually, this is one of the most telling signs. The most elite among us, the most elite, far more elite than you and me. They're the ones who own everything. They're the ones that control everything, but they're starting to get nervous. They are hidden away with their teams of multi-billion-dollar, researchers and techies and things, trying to find AI answers to everything before somebody else does, right? Because the one who gets there first is going to rule the world. And they know that, chances are that the rest of them will end up getting ruined. Because whoever finds the answer to the new reality, if it happens to be one of these elite kind of special folk with all the money and all the power, they're going to end up basically setting the standard for everyone else. And everyone else comes second. So those same people, while they're in this race to the top, they're also desperately scouring the planet, looking for somewhere safe to put their underground bunker, just in case they need it, so they can hide away from accountability when it all comes crashing down. That's our biggest clue. When those who are in control are starting to do weird, nervous things. And personally, I'm kind of looking forward to it because it demonstrates that they know that they're not invincible as well. I'm actually pretty disgusted with the richest among us right now, the ones who are spending all of their time trying to do things like populate Mars, when billions of people haven't got enough to eat or drink around the world, nowhere to sleep, and no one to really love them. It's, really basic stuff. And we don't need to go to Mars. What we need to do is we need to fix what's here. Just my humble opinion. But hey, you know what? Let's road trip to Mars instead, just for kicks. Just for kicks. And quite frankly, I'm going to be really honest. I don't actually think we're ever going to get to Mars. I don't think we're ever going to get to Mars. And the reason for that is because we are a ridiculously barbaric race of beings that are probably notorious throughout the galaxy. And we can build as many rockets as we want. We can build the biggest, the baddest, the most sophisticated rockets that ever existed. I think that they will always get sabotaged in a really curious way before we even manage to leave our own cosmic pin that's been assigned for us. Nobody wants the galactic equivalent of MS-13 moving into their neighborhood. And that includes our cosmic neighbors. They just don't. So, all that money that's being wasted on things like populating other planets, it really would go to much better use just fixing the one that we've got and helping the people who live in it, who don't have anyone else to help them. But you know what? That's not the reason for this video. So let me just move on. And yet, beyond the dissonance, beneath all the turmoil and all this uncertainty and all the frantic one-upmanship, there is something beautiful taking place. We can sense it. It's like a shift, a birth, right? Not into the direction of despair, but more into something, I don't know, maybe kind of effervescent. And I'm getting a little chill as I say it. Effervescent, I think, is a great word. Something that can no longer be held back. You know, when you are pouring something like a carbonated drink into a glass and it's going in a bit too fast and the effervescence of the drink starts to overflow. And there's always a risk that it's just going to overflow and the glass can't contain it anymore. That's what it feels like. So I think effervescence is a really good word. Eckhart Tolle once said something, and I love this saying. He said, "You are the universe expressing itself as a human for a little while." He beautifully reframed the human life experience as being a temporary embodiment of cosmic consciousness. And also, in a similar vein, Einstein once said, "The religion of the future will be a cosmic religion." I really hope so. Gosh, I really hope so. A religion without the dogma, without rigid theologies, one that transcends personal gods and tribal separation. It would be lovely to have a religion that isn't based on fear. Instead, it rises from awareness and it lives inside our breath, inside our breathing and our beating heart, our connection with one another and in the weaving together of our mind and our body and our spirit. Gosh, I really, really hope so, because the alternative looks like it would be a bunch of grossly unkept people sitting in stained pajamas, living in squalor, obsessing about their artificially generated and simulated love affair on their mobile phone. That just sounds sad. I prefer the other side, this kind of cosmic awakening and our recognition of the fact that we have the divinity inside us. Yeah, I definitely prefer the first one. A cosmic religion of self, the age of Aquarius, but without all the techno-babble. Yeah? So this is a kind of natural expression of prophecy, but it's also just a type of recognition of reality. A spirited awakening that was born from science and technology, but it has been anchored inside our emotions. And it's been driven really deep into our memory by our ancient experiences, most of which we forgot for tens of thousands of years at least. But now it's slowly, one by one, starting to come back. We're beginning to remember again. I actually believe this because I heard this for the first time not that long ago, the fact that we're remembering again. I don't know why it took me that long to hear it. And as soon as I heard it, it resonated with me. As though, yes, that's what it is that I'm feeling. That's what's coming to me in dreams. That's what's the sensations that come to me when I say something that crosses over the boundary of whatever it is. And that kind of chill that I get, like I'm tapping on the door of something that I had forgotten. We're entering an era where reality is being rewritten, not by the government and the status quo, not by all the gurus who claim to be experts, but by our own consciousness, individual and collective. It's that invisible realm of thought that is sort of magnetized to our emotional energy. Now, even scientists have stopped ignoring this phenomena and they've kind of stopped denying it, although some of them are still living in dogma. But many of them are starting to explore it now, because it's become quite obvious to everyone that reality and life is not as cut and dry as we once thought it was. There is more than what we originally believed, and we don't have to believe people now. We don't really have to use faith in order to see that for ourselves. We can feel it inside ourselves, so we know that it's true. When we speak, we often use phrases like my thoughts and my feelings. It's as though consciousness is a private possession that belongs to us. Like our brain and our mind owns our consciousness, right? But what if it's around the other way? What if the mind is not a container that owns consciousness? What if it's more like an antenna, a receiver, that receives a signal of consciousness from somewhere else? What if our thoughts are not generated, but we kind of are tuning into our thoughts and they're coming from something greater? Like we're borrowing them from a vast field of consciousness and awareness that exists across everything, that exists. So that was kind of double talk. But yeah, we're kind of borrowing it from a wider field of existence that is made up of awareness and consciousness. So modern scientific research on consciousness is starting to point to this possibility. And so I'm glad, it makes me very proud to know that the scientists are finally catching up. I mean, Helena Blavatsky talked about this very same thing in her book, The Secret Doctrine, that was published, I think, in the late 1800s. So, thank you, science, for finally getting there. And Edgar Casey also spoke about this in his trances and the notes that were taken by his stenographer in the early 1900s. But now in the 21st century, in experiments on things like remote viewing and precognition, subjects have been able to access information that is beyond their sensory reach in ways that are proven. What this shows is that consciousness is not confined to the brain, but it derives from a non-local field, from a field outside of the brain, outside of the body. And even when we receive that consciousness through the antenna, which is our mind, it doesn't just stay in the mind. That sensation that you feel when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up in recognition of something that's about to happen, right? That might be your consciousness alerting your body, connecting the mind and the body and the spirit together. The tingling in your fingers or toes when you meditate or in other parts of your body. That could be your consciousness kind of awakening your body so that it can enter into your body and make you whole for that moment. That receiver might be the mind. The receiver of the consciousness might be the mind. But the entire body becomes conscious, particularly in some moments, but at least notably in some moments. There's also another scientific study in which they split the hemispheres of the two brain. They split those hemispheres, and each side continued to demonstrate its own stream of consciousness or its own stream of awareness. And that's telling as well, because that experiment implies that the brain may only be a translator of the consciousness, not the actual originator of the experience. So between these kinds of studies, science is beginning to prove that the consciousness experience occurs outside of us. Our mind acts like a receiver, an antenna, that picks up the consciousness, the actual signal of the consciousness, translates it, and then we know what we know. But the consciousness originated somewhere else. And so I thought I'd share a couple of actual examples of how this is being discovered. So in example 1, this is where the brain was shown to be a filter rather than a generator of consciousness. Neuroscientist Carl Pribram and physicist David Bohm did studies on people who report near-death experience and also people who have undergone anesthesia. Say, for example, during surgery or something like that. In both of those instances, and despite the minimal brain activity that was occurring during both of the scenarios, some subjects were still able to process vivid experiences. Pribham and Boehm concluded from their experiments that the brain functions like a radio receiver. Just as I said, it decodes information from a holographic field of consciousness. In example number 2, this is about the shared consciousness that occurs during group meditations. So there were studies that were done on synchronized meditation where people all group together and are guided into a kind of collaborative meditative state. The studies showed that in these groups, the subjects' brainwaves began to harmonize after a period of time. It even happened when they weren't physically together in the moment, but still meditating in a guided manner so that they would be collaborative. The subjects reported having the same visions, the same emotions, and the same insights in many cases. It was like they had all tapped into a communal stream of consciousness. What the studies showed was that consciousness is not an isolated possession for a single person. It is interwoven like a tapestry among everyone. The studies that I've just talked about, they related to people. Okay. But I think we need to stop being so arrogant as to think that it isn't the case for animals too. And we've already discovered that trees communicate with one another. So there is nothing out there that isn't interwoven into the consciousness field. Everything we do and think and plan and say and hope for, and every emotion we feel, every bit of pain that we inflict onto anything or anyone is happening inside a greater collective consciousness. And then there's the sun. Okay, so this has me fascinated. There are recent theories in panpsychism that suggest that the sun may be more than just a ball of plasma. It may be a conscious entity radiating not just light, but also awareness. There's a biologist by the name of Rupert Sheldrake who says that the sun has a rhythmic electromagnetic field that is like an intermediary or a link between the cosmic mind and planetary life. That's so exciting. If this is true, it explains an awful lot. So imagine if the sun is the source of our consciousness and it is radiating awareness to us and we are receiving those messages. Then does that kind of explain things like winter sadness, for example? You know, there are people who go into periods of depression when they're exposed to long stretches of short days and dark skies. And does it also explain how the biological clock often goes a bit haywire for people who work nights and sleep during the day? I personally know someone whose personality changed completely when he stopped working nights and was finally promoted into a day job. He used to suffer a lot of depression and he was always unwell and he was always kind of grumpy as well. And then he just seemed like a new person and once he started working days. And I wonder, is this because he had greater access to sun consciousness? And I mean, I'm always quite emotionally and spiritually stable as an individual. Is that because I'm a morning person? I mean, I'm always up before dawn pretty much every single day. And I tend to be out with my dog in the earliest part of the daylight hours, almost every day. And as often as I can be when I'm not working, I'm outdoors. And I also tend to be out with the dog towards the end of the daylight hours as well. Is my conscious state being dictated to me by my habit of maximizing daylight hours as much as I can? But there's also something else about the sun being our source of consciousness. If true, this would explain humanity's ancient reverence for sun gods. Not because of superstition, but because the ancient civilizations knew that the source of our sentience is the sun. Because every single age has had a sun god, specifically a sun god, who is the ultimate god. And you know, the sign of all the great masters, whether they're interpreted through Egyptian mythology or Australian indigenous stories or during ancient Roman times, they all associated the deity and his or her wisdom to having had a connection with the sun. They often had a sun symbol, either above or behind the deity's head, like Jesus Christ, for example. The man was Jesus. The Christ was his evolved and expanded connection to the sun consciousness, which made him more sentient, more awake than anyone. So there you go. Ellie has just discovered a whole new thing. You see, you don't actually need to be a scientist to start putting all of these things together. You just need to connect the dots. You need to be patient. You need to always have your memory at the ready and an open mind to be able to go, oh, that seems to link with that, and that kind of links with this. And then it all starts to make sense. And we are due a new sun god because we're entering into a new age. So to finish this thought, right, the embodiment of consciousness is not a concept of ownership. We don't own our consciousness. We participate in our consciousness. And that might explain why some people appear to be very unconscious beings, because perhaps they're closed off to awakening. They aren't really participating. It's almost like they are, in a way, dying off a little bit in terms of their consciousness. Whereas people who are participating, who are recognizing that consciousness is shared, they are expanding and becoming more vibrant, more effervescent, more alive. But there's also one more thing. If the sun is the consciousness and we are just the receiver, then our body is not a prison, like has been considered in the past through some teachings, religious teachings, for example, or spiritual teachings. Our body is not a prison. It's more like a prism We are an entity that receives the light and refracts the light. We digest the light and we project the light into the energy fields around us. And other prisms also receive it and project it and digest it. Yeah. And then others and others and others. And so this is one more piece in the puzzle that proves that we affect our reality. What we think, what we do, what we watch or listen to, what we wish for and plan and hope for, it all manifests our future. We are receiving and we are emitting outward. So then the question becomes, what kind of reality will we choose to borrow next? Will it be shaped by doubt and reaction, or will it be one that's sculpted by intuition and intention? Because no matter where each of us is starting from, whether it's grief or chaos or just hopefulness perhaps, we're still each a fractal of the cosmos. We're like a single note in a massive, larger symphony. And the funny thing is that I think we've also just proven something else, something a little bit more unexpected. And science hasn't caught up to this bit yet, but I'm sure they will. Or maybe they have and they just haven't admitted it. I don't know. But think about this. If the sun is our consciousness and we are the receivers, billions of receivers all ingesting and projecting, interwoven and interdependent forever and ever and ever, then our emotions are sketching out our future. Our behaviors are implementing that future. And we have a direct and indirect impact on everything around us. And everything around us has a direct and indirect impact on us. Everything and everyone. But, and this is where it gets really important, a very important but, a great big important but. We're not the only planet with the sun. And so if the sun is our consciousness, then I think we've just proven, and we're just waiting for it to be confirmed by science, I think we've just proven that we're not alone. Because of course we're not alone. I think, it makes me laugh whenever I hear someone say that the ET theories are nonsense, right? But you see, now we have a reason to really believe that we're not alone. We have a link. We have a link that helps us to understand how we can know that we're not alone. It takes us directly from our own existence and what science has already scratched the surface of, that our consciousness doesn't sit in our brain. It sits outside, and potentially it takes us from our existence to the sun. But then you see, from the sun, our knowledge knows now that it goes beyond the sun to the other suns that exist out there. Which kind of shows us that if we are receiving and emitting the light of consciousness that comes from the sun, and this is not the only sun that exists, then that means the other suns are creating consciousness or are originating consciousness that is being emitted out to other conscious beings. You didn't realize that this was going to end with aliens. I know, I kind of, I had to put it in there at the end because it kind of tells us something, doesn't it? Welcome to the new world. This is Ellie Dreams Down Under. Don't forget to subscribe and like and comment and share and all the good stuff. Yep. I love knowing you're here, and I'll see you in my dreams.